Hey, Jess, welcome. So excited to talk to you. Let me hand this over so you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good to see you. I'm a vice president of client management within the loyalty division of a market leading firm. We work alongside well known brands in various verticals like the FI space, telecom, and others. And we essentially offer services to leverage points, miles, rewards to drive behaviors of their customers.
You know that I love the loyalty space, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to Jess today to dive into the client management space as well as the loyalty side of it and combining those two together. And then what are some of the things that you love about the role, some of the things that you find challenging. So, the first question for you is, how long have you been in client management space and what led you to this?
So with my current role, I've been here just over 14 years, so a while, but always within client management, and I love it. I think the loyalty space is really unique, and there's something new to learn around every corner that I go. I would say, before this, I had something that was somewhat in a similar vein, but very different type of a company. So, interestingly enough, before this role, I was a video game buyer for Circuit City in Richmond, Virginia. So, in that role, while there was a large B2C component, being that we were, a leading retailer, I was essentially the client for large brands like Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, Electronic Arts, and we would work with those companies to put things in the stores. And so ultimately our end consumer was, the customer buying online or in the store channels. But I think that experience gave me a unique lens coming into the space that I am now.
I will say people who have managed client services or been in that kind of hot seat, if you will, are always super effective, I find, in all of the other aspects of the business. So, high appreciation for that. Tell me something that you love about being in your client services role.
So I guess this maybe the things that have kept me in this place the longest are two things, right? I love the people I work with, both the people internally and the clients externally, as frustrating as they can be sometimes. But I love that this space has consistently evolved in many ways over the years. So, one thing that comes to mind is, when I first started here, loyalty was a smaller space. There's less players, less competition, and as more people entered into the market,
Mhm.
offering similar services, we definitely diversified ourselves and created what I'll call a reseller market space. So we had and still have many direct client contracts, but we also have several, strategic, what I'll call reseller partnerships where they also use us on the back end of their solution. So oftentimes we may have a company go to bid in an RFP and realize that it's ultimately us behind the scenes for various bids, which I think is highly interesting. So that's just one thing that I think is interesting and has changed. So to answer your question, the change, things are all always changing and evolving.
Before we get into like the
Exactly.
challenges, which I also want to hear from you about, I do want to ask you about the loyalty space that you're in. You mentioned kind of the points and the miles and how people are leveraging that, whether it's in financial institutions and other clients you're servicing. But will you just describe that a bit for people who don't understand the reward space?
Sure. Yeah. So at the most simplistic level, if you are transacting within some kind of rewards program, whether it's something using a credit card or within a retail space and you're earning points or miles or whatever currency that this company is giving you to incent you or reward you for doing some kind of behavior, um, my organization is on the back end either facilitating the redemptions or getting you that reward or helping drive strategy for these companies that are trying to get you to, spend money on the credit card or to purchase goods through their retail store versus someone else's. Um,
Why do companies offer the rewards portfolio, right, as an option for their customers? And what would you say that would be a kind of a main driver, if you will, from a business point?
I mean, I think it's you hear the terminology or the terms emotional loyalty. So people purchase goods for a certain reason. Sometimes it's out of need, sometimes it's out of habit, or just because you really love a product. But there are some areas where if you incent me to go to Kroger, for example, or somewhere and purchase goods, and you're going to give me something on the back end, I go there. So at the end of the day, it's just one other lever that companies can use to drive customer behavior in a way that's
Sure.
meaningful or that fits in with their strategy. So at the end of the day, that's why you have loyalty programs to keep your customers sticky, keep your credit card top of wallet, whatever the desired outcome is for your company.
Loyalty should never be looked at as some sort of tactic necessarily, but it should fit into the overarching strategy. And typically it's lifetime
Absolutely.
value. Um, so let's head into that challenge question. In client management in particular, I'd love to understand what you find challenging. Is that unique because it's in the loyalty space, or is not unique because it's just unique to the client management space?
I would assume that in most client management spaces, one of the big challenges is when the client goals are not aligned with, my company's strategy, right? If there's no alignment, it can be, an ongoing negotiation where you're trying to find the
Mhm.
best outcome for both sides, whether that's the client or internal stakeholders. And so I think having the mindset where you have a balanced perspective, taking positives and negatives, putting them together to find the best solution or outcome is, it's sometimes like a game or trying to fit puzzle pieces together, right? Sometimes you lose, but hopefully more often than not, you find a good path forward that everyone
Yeah.
is happy with and can live with. Um, I think having the ability to see things from your client's perspective or internal stakeholders is really key in this kind of role. Because without that kind of perspective, you won't be able to have the vision to find that positive outcome.
So you and your team are doing a lot in that
Absolutely.
space to make sure that, hey, we're not only delivering the service and what you need, the value, so that when it comes to the time when renewals come, you're able to really have those easy transition to extending contracts. So I think those are some of the things that people should consider as well. When you are heading into that space, how are you creating that value proposition, which you probably are throughout the year, but can you talk a little bit about that piece of it, maybe? Getting to the point where creating value for the customer so that those conversations are a little smoother.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you can be as transparent with your client as possible, with what you can share, and then really understanding the client's goals and what they're looking to drive, it becomes much easier to find a negotiation point as you're going into renewals or even bringing on new business, right? So again, being able to look at something from all angles and, tying that into some ability to anticipate for your client or internal stakeholder needs and questions. So it's not just, answering a question or taking something and pushing it from one place to the other, but bringing it something to a client and really considering, well, when I say this and I tell them this positive news,
Mhm.
what will they say next? Or what will they ask me when I give them not such great news? And then overly thinking through that so that you're
Mhm.
prepared in the conversation, and ultimately confident in your delivery to get the client to a good place. So I think those are the types of strategies that work well in renewal conversations. Ultimately, understanding the client really well and then being overly prepared.
What type of characteristics in a client manager or an account executive do you find successful in this space?
Um, so I would say within our world, because things change so much, for us, being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? So not everything's going to go smoothly. You have to be able to pivot and adjust and be okay with something going a different direction and then quickly shifting and addressing whatever needs the client has. Um, I think that is one really important quality for the associates on my team to have, that provides them with success. And then again, I keep saying I'm using the word perspective, but having the ability to have perspective. So looking at it from different people's perspective to create the best outcome for your client, because not everything's always going to be black and white.
Maybe one last question for you. In terms of from a loyalty standpoint, what are some of the things you're finding are the trends now in the loyalty space?
So within loyalty, I think emotional loyalty always comes up, and it's not anything that's new, but it's reminding, right? So when you are spending and transacting, that's exactly what it is. It's transactional. And so I think things kind of ebb and flow. I've seen peaks and valleys where, the pendulum swings from one side to the other and it's all out transaction, transaction, transaction. And you tend to forget the emotional side. And then also, I guess, meeting customers where they want to be. So point of sale or being in the moment with those rewards is not necessarily anything that's new, but it comes up and goes away oftentimes. And I think those are two trends that are still there. I wouldn't say they're newly emerging trends, but they're definitely some that, continually come up again and again. And then ultimately, I know a lot of people talk about AI. And so Don't know how that's going to impact our world, but I think it's something that we're keeping an eye on.
Yes. I think with AI, there's a little bit more predictive modeling and different things that can come in and personalization that can be possible, right? So it'll be exciting and we'll see what happens. But thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate it.
For
And
sure.
hopefully people who are listening can
Yeah,
just get a little bit more understanding about loyalty, but then also on the client's management side of the house. And if they're interested in that role, learned a little bit from you today. So thank you so much.